Good morning, good afternoon, and evening, wherever you are calling in from. We'll wait just a few minutes as attendees move over from the waiting room. For those of you that have just joined us, we're waiting just a few minutes to allow individuals to move over from the waiting room. We still have a few more coming into the room. Okay, great. I think we're ready to begin. Welcome to our final webinar of Global Meetings Industry Day. This is the second EIC APEX COVID-19 Business Recovery Task Force Open House session, and we will be discussing workforce issues. My name is Dee Gish Panjada. I'm a member of the EIC staff. Before the session begins, I have some important housekeeping notes for you. The presentation is being recorded and will run approximately 1 hour, including question and answer time at the end. It will also be available afterwards on the EIC YouTube channel. All participants watching live will receive CEs, which will appear in your account within 1 week of today. Participants can listen to the webinar through their computers or by dialing in using the number and passcode provided by the Zoom software. We also welcome you to utilize the closed captioning function. Click on the CC button at the bottom of your screen and you will find the link to the live subtitles. If you have questions, we encourage you to submit them using the question and answer panel, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. You don't have to wait to submit your questions until the end of the presentation. We will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. The Q&A panel is separate from the chat, and we encourage you to say hello to other participants and include your location in the chat anytime during the webinar and before entering your questions in the Q&A. And now I will hand it over to Events Industry Council CEO, Amy Calvert. Amy, take it away.
Thanks so much, Dee Dee. Welcome, everyone. We're so happy to be with you on what is the eve, and in some cases, the day of Global Meetings Industry Day itself. It's a terrific time for all of us as professionals to come together and really engage in some generous conversation about what the road ahead looks like and how much we've really truly learned over the past 12 months about all the things that we know that when we are united, we can accomplish. And so this organization, EIC, as many of you know, is a federation of members from all over the globe, representing over 120,000 individuals. And really the mission, vision, and values that EIC purports are really all to help lift up the 26 million professionals that work in our industry. When we thought about the conversations that we wanted to host and the way in which we wanted to show up for Global Meetings Industry Day, we were really honing in on hosting some purpose-driven conversations around supporting our global workforce, advocacy, preparedness, and of course, sustainability and equity. And of course, the work of our amazing APEX COVID Business Recovery Task Force. And this is really what this open house is all about. Ways in which these incredible professionals that have worked together so generously over the past 12 months can help you better understand all of the resources that are available to you, how to activate them, and then share them out within your own organizations. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn it over to our APEX COVID Task Force Chair, Kristin Horstman, our moderator for this evening. Kristin has done a fantastic job leading this group, has really given so generously of her time through a few moves of her own, personal moves, and a lot of learnings along the way. Thank you again to all of our participants for being here. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. So Kristin, take it away.
Thanks, Amy. And Welcome, everyone. I know I'm looking at everybody on the chat. I saw Mexico, Montreal, New York. So I know we have people waking up, people sitting down for dinner. And if you can see me, I'm outside because I have dogs I needed to put in the house. I have contractors, and this is the life we've been living for the last year. So today's going to be a really fun, candid conversation, a great group of people. And, you know, it's been a year since we've put this task force together, and the accomplishments that we've done with, you know, a great leader with Amy and her board. So it's really going to be a fun and lively conversation. And I want to introduce this panel of industry experts, starting with Allison Kinsley of the Kinsley meetings, David Kliman of the Kliman Group, WeeMin, the Vice President of Convention Exhibitions from Marina Bay Sands, Julie Smith with GES, and Johnnie with the American Society of Appraisers. And I, Kristin Horstman, work for Salesforce, and I'm located here on the West Coast. So I am really excited. I want everybody to please use the chat as we go through and have some of the conversations, some topics. If we don't touch on something, please bring it up. And I think the team from EIC is going to also pop in the chat where you can find all these guides as well. So we'll make it really easy for you. The one thing I want to, really address is that Amy has set such a great precedent for this task force, and the principles that she's going to, discuss with us really set the tone for the conversation and how these guidebooks came to life. So I want to turn it back over to Amy so she can really explain how these fundamental principles really set the tone for us.
Thanks, Kristin. I think we have a slide for all of you, so you can, I'm so visual, right? So it always helps me to actually see. And we've provided the link for all of you on the webinar with us today so you can access the document yourself. But, you know, one of the things, and I'm really going to give kudos to Kristin and Mike Dominguez and all of the leaders, David Kliman and all of the panelists here tonight, that this was a real, true collaboration. Everybody really brought an open mind to the process. And we worked really hard to develop a core set of values, a unique vision that aligned and laddered up to EIC's vision. And really thinking about how do we align the work and have something to draw upon as we go through space and time and develop these resources that is a reflection of that vision, those values. And, you know, as many of you know, EIC has been really committed through our Center for Sustainability and Social Impact in aligning with the UN SDGs. And as we started to think about what we were facing in terms of this global pandemic, which at the heart speaks to issues around inequities, we really felt it was an opportunity to think a little bit deeply about, you know, that which we wanted to ensure we didn't lose sight of as we come out of this pandemic, and ensure we carried forward these learnings and really assert the things that we stand for through these principles as a reflection of our values and the impact we have when we are united around working towards the things that matter and speaking towards and about how events themselves do indeed drive economic impact, but more importantly, when you start to think about telling our best story, help to build communities, help to create meaningful career pathways, help to build and work on, you know, issues around social justice. So, you know, we've put forward these principles for recovery, and not only on behalf of our members, but for all of the global business events industry to utilize as they think about building back stronger and more committed to our values. And I think as you look at, you know, the principles themselves, 1 through 6, I think it's really easy to see how important these are now, particularly as we think about preparing our workforce, really thinking about how events themselves are one of the primary ways in which adults learn and grow and develop professionally, how we really will drive not only our own recovery, but be essential as part of the global economic recovery itself. And ultimately our commitment to the issues that we were facing long before the pandemic, right? The issues around climate, the issues around, reskilling and upskilling our workforce. So again, I think, we're really proud of these principles. This work that we're doing as a task force is truly a reflection of our commitment to them. And you will be able to see as we have this discussion this evening and as we carry forward through space and time, the work that this task force does, our true commitment to them. So happy to answer any questions, but I think that it's really important, again, that we have something like this to draw upon as we start to think about the work that we're going to do together for the remainder of 2021. Kristin?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. I think we have a poll coming up here as we're going to talk about the guidebooks really quick.
Yep.
Yes. So, a year ago when this task force came together, we really were talking about what does everyone need? And you can see we have these 14 different guidebooks, and we're going to touch on a few of them today. And what I'm excited about is that this is curated content. This is not net new content that we wrote as a committee. We curated the best content for everyone when they start to get back into live events, as we're working with digital. They really are a resource and a toolkit. And I think today we are going to hear how some of these are helping a lot of the folks start or continue their journey down the event path. So with that, what I would like to talk about is, I think we have a couple polls, right? That we're going to, yes. So we want to kind of see where everybody is in their journey right now. So the first question is going to be, when are you holding your next in-person event? Hopefully everybody can see that up on their screen. Wish we had like some background music. All right. And I think we get to see the results here in real time. Just give it a couple
minutes. We'll give it just another moment or two.
Okay, so you want me to go to the next question?
I'll share these results in just a moment.
Okay. And then we can move on.
Yes.
Yeah. Look at that. So second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. So things I think are getting accelerated, which I think we're going to dive into here in a minute. Let's look at the next question. What format will you use for your next event?
We'll just give it another moment.
Yeah, give us a moment. We'll bring the results right up.
It's across the board, kind of even here on what everybody's going to be doing. So that's really, really interesting. So I think this helps the panel kind of, craft our conversation today. And what I'm excited about is that we have such a global audience, and we're all in different places as we start to really look at what in person. And I will tell you, for our company, we're using in person as the definition versus live, because then you have this broadcast type element. So we use in person. So as we go forward, I think to our next, I think we're done with slides, right, Colleen? We'll put the panel up. Awesome. There we go. All those great faces. So I think the first one we're going to start with is Allison, because it was a year ago, you got joined this task force, and you were tapped to be on the meaning and design, which meant, all right, what do we get people to start thinking about? Now, I feel like everybody's going to take this guidebook and use it as a Bible, because now we really get to put some of these principles into place. And I don't know about you, but I can feel the energy and the excitement about getting into live. So I'd love to hear from you. Like, you're working with clients, and I'd love to hear what people are saying and what they're focused on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing that it's been almost a year since we put this initial guidebook together. And I know that so many of us are ready to find ways back into in-person meetings. But as we've seen on the survey, a lot of organizations are in different stages of readiness to start gathering again. So the tools that we put together in this particular guidebook, they're not meant to be definitive standards. They are meant to be adaptable pieces that reflect what your organization or your industry is doing. There are a couple keys here, and I know we've been using them with our clients at Kinsley meetings. The decision matrix lays out risk levels and protocol suggestions. We're all so used to risk levels at this point, aren't we? We've probably seen similar tools used by government organizations. Are we in risk level red? Are we in risk level orange? But this focuses, this decision matrix in the guidebook focuses on areas specific to meetings, like travel and facility occupancy and individual safety guidelines. For example, are there travel bans for organizations that we're putting meetings on for? And can necessary safety guidelines be met by the venue or hotel? So that's the decision matrix that we can start making decisions against if we do decide to meet. We recognize that organizations and planners are not the only ones who are responsible for the health and safety of participants. So we included in the guidebook a code of conduct, which lays out how the responsibility for health and safety is shared. It's really an important communications piece to establish expectations of behavior. There may be conflicting information out there on what a local municipality is expecting, or a venue or facility, much less what the organization itself is expecting of attendees. So a code of conduct can address things like testing or use of masks or social distancing and temperature checks. It really lets participants know not only what they should be doing, but what they can expect of other people who are coming to this meeting. It's really sort of ground rules for everybody. And the final piece is communications in the guidebook. And if there's one thing that I can say, it's that you can't over communicate. You cannot communicate too much as we go back into meetings, because everybody needs to sort of everyone has their own expectations of what it is to come back into meetings in person. And we need to let them know that we've really thought this through for them and what they can expect as they come in. Back to you, Kristin.
Well, Allison, a lot of what you're talking about sounds like strategy. And I will say that as event professionals, sometimes we don't put strategy first. Sometimes we go right into tactics. So I feel like, COVID and the pandemic has really pushed us this year, because now you can't just rinse and repeat. And I know I'm going through that right now and trying to figure out, how do we do online and in person? And I feel like, where do we start? I know you had the decision matrix, but it feels like there's a lot to think through. So how do you start that conversation, whether it's with your leadership, your board, where do you start? Because it's a lot.
Well, I mean, there are so many stakeholders that are really key to making decisions on this. Yes, the decision matrix can start a conversation for you whether it be with your board or your executives. A lot of my organizations are also surveying their the potential attendees. And you've got to factor all that into the strategy, because it isn't about hand sanitizing stations and whether people wear masks. It's really about mindset, about people's readiness to come back to things. You've got to factor all that in. It's not a simple equation.
Agreed. I feel like it is the tactics and the science and the behavior. And we're going through that right now. And you know, any of the other panelists that want to chime in, I think there's one, we're seeing a lot of that. I've seen a lot on LinkedIn where organizations are asking, would you want to get on an airplane? Do you want to meet? But I think the other factors people forget about is your staff and your team and your volunteers. Do they want to travel? And I think we had this conversation, early last December, because we had a small, and there were some people who were like, no, but that was before vaccines. Now we're getting vaccinated. So I think don't forget about that group of people, because
Kristin, I think it's so important understanding attendees, staff, stakeholders' sentiment. And the health and wellness workbook helps address that, but it overarches everything that we're talking about, because we're in this unique recovery where there's vaccines out there, but it's not equitable around the globe. And you have some people that are able to travel, some that aren't, and understanding what the sentiment is layered on top of the risk matrix that Allison articulated is really key.
So sorry, Allison. I was just going to say, one of the things that I love about these guides, and they're all really meant to kind of complement each other and work together. And one of the common threads is that we've developed guides for hosting strategic conversations with your partners, right? And to not lose sight about how key that is to really, be as forthcoming and open and honest and interested, and really trying to understand, that we're traditionally a business that's really touted our commitment to partnerships, but now we have a chance to really get behind that and really invest in those as we start to think about what is it going to take in the here and now, and also this notion of, empathy, right? We, as David and Allison and you suggested, we have an opportunity to create a valuable experience for our participants, whether they wish to be with us in person or potentially in a hybrid or a digital environment. So.
Thanks, Amy. So David, I want to, sorry, Johnny, let me just.
Well, go ahead.
Nope, go for it.
Oh, so I just wanted to highlight one thing is everyone's hearing strategy. I mean, that's what we need to do in this day and age, is be able to strategize how we are planning this. And this is something that I've been trying to do for the last 10 years. I mean, this industry is not meeting planners and we're just looking at logistics. We are event strategists. And this is all levels of event strategists, those that are working at the venues to those that are the organizers and so forth. So, keep that in mind. And I want to keep pushing that. Especially for this industry, because I think one of the things, and me being a CEO now, but previous points of my career, I always had to fight to be at the table, or I always had to, justify, why meetings are so important for organizations. Now being on the other side and now understanding that, I want us to, take this opportunity and really show how the organizations, how much we're such an asset to organizations, because we are strategizing about the events. We're doing so many different things that we were doing before when it was just counting the cups of coffee. And I know we do a lot more than that, but that's what leadership thinks about these type of positions. So I just wanted to hone in on that strategy component, and being the person that was working on the workforce, that's the things that we're trying to put out there, that this is a strategy mechanism that we're using.
Such a good point, Johnny. And I think part of that strategy is, what partners that are sitting at the table with us as well. And, David, I feel like you're the godfather of destinations. Like, you have worked with so many, that's your new title.
That's my new title.
That's pretty brilliant, Kristin.
I had to figure out something, because I really do. I feel like I could reach out to you in any minute, and somebody in your future. Yeah, he knows everybody. He knows a little bit. And I just would love, right now more than any, I feel that those destinations are a partner at the table with us to understand, what we're bringing into that city. What do we need to know? What government agencies do we need to talk to? I just feel like they play an even bigger role than they ever had before. Absolutely. So I'd love for you to kind of tell us, where they were, a year ago, how things have changed for them, and what are they, destinations thinking for the future?
Yeah, I mean, clearly I've built a career on DMOs and CVBs, and there is an existential crisis that the pandemic has created because the funding pipeline was eradicated and more jobs were lost in our sector of tourism worldwide than in any other sector. And that has specifically impacted the funding pipeline for DMOs. So really what it comes down to, interesting, Amy kicked it off with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and I'll jump to number 17, partnerships. The recovery out of this pandemic will require a global mindset and open, transparent cooperation, coordination, partnership between all stakeholders. And the DMO is at the nexus of that. So I know that, for instance, we had a question in the chat from my friend Connie Bergeron asked, how do I understand which borders are open and how, is there a single source? Well, there probably isn't a single source, but there is a best source. And that is the DMOs. There is no recovery of economic world recovery without the recovery of tourism. Borders are integral to that. And the DMOs really are the experts and are the center points that can access the information, whether it's governmental, border, and other policies. They have the tools, the relationships, the knowledge to do that. And I can talk for a long time on this, but that's the core of it right there.
David, I think a lot of people, some are very familiar on what a DMO offers, and some I don't think even understand how much depth that they have or what they could help you with. Can you just give a few instances how and why you should, partner with your
Yeah, I mean, I think pre-pandemic, it was, you could put it under dates, rates, and space. That's what a destination marketing organization at its core would do. Now, really what they are the access point to every policy, procedure, tool that a destination has from a visitor experience point of view, whether it's leisure or group or combined. So to be able to, let's just say, you're going to San Francisco and there's this ever changing how many people are allowed inside, and is it 25, is it 50, is it unlimited? To be able to go to the destination marketing organization as a planner and say, I'm interested in your destination, open the chest to me and uncover all these tools. Obviously, they can handle dates, rates, and space, but now they're really the conduit to policy, procedures, governmental regulations, and use them for that.
So I think that's a good segment because I'd love to bring WeeMin in because, with the destination, an exhibition hall, a convention center usually is, part of that discussion. And, we are, a lot of those have been used for other things this last year, vaccination centers or had to rehome. And so are we ready? Are we prepared? And what should we be thinking about if we're bringing our large groups, back to these exhibition centers?
I think it's a very surreal moment for me because exactly 1 year ago, Singapore entered into what we term a circuit breaker. It's our version of a lockdown. I've been working in this industry for the last 25 years, and I've never seen a moment where everything came to a screeching halt, and that was the moment. We were in complete standstill mode for 2 months, and it was surreal. Now 1 year later, and we are talking about the green shoots of recovery and the next steps, and it's so important that the Apex Guide was there to help us in our planning. So some of the protocols that we implemented in Singapore were actually regulation driven. I think science is going to lead the recovery of the economy and the industry, and regulations whichever city that we operate in the regulations will form the baseline of how we operate as a venue or as a meeting if we bring a meeting to a particular city. That's the good news, and that's the bad news, because it means that if you bring a meeting to Singapore versus South Korea or to New York, a different set of protocols, which I think I will have to point back to David's point about talking to DMO, because it's about understanding the regulatory framework that we operate in. So in Singapore, we adopted a very safe, cautious, and phased approach to reopening the industry. Our industry actually reopened on the 1st of October last year. But it was in a very small way. We only allowed for group meetings of 10 people. And then slowly it went on to 50 people. It's a step, what we term as a step-by-step test and learn process, where we use a small group so that the risk mitigation is there. 10 people, 50 people, we looked at how we could implement safe meeting measures, how we could, in theory, if you sanitize something, it will work. And what happens if you pass a mic around, all these little things, we will test those. We test registration concepts. What is contactless registration all about? Facial recognition, for example. We tested hybrid formats. And of course, when you go for meetings, it's all about F&B as well, and in the COVID world, you can't do buffets. And we tested how you could do a lunch, coffee break, or even a short networking session in a very small, calibrated manner. Learned from the learnings that we have, and then implement the proposed solution. Let me give you an example. When we hosted the first pilot, it was a pilot with antigen tests. So everyone need to go through antigen tests. And when the testing center came, they set up our tables in clear plastic sheets, something very sterile, and something that our industry is not familiar about. And the flows were not optimized. So the next event that we did, we worked with the health authorities to kind of streamline all those flows. So it's a step-by-step test and learn process. I think it's very important for everyone to share their learnings collectively within this group, especially. And we found especially the COVID-19, the Apex COVID-19 guidebooks for B2B events, B2C exhibitions and meeting and designs to be especially useful for us in our reopening journey, what we term as a rebirth journey here at Marina Bay Sands. Over back to you, Kristin.
I think that is all amazing. And I do feel like you guys, that Asia Pacific has been at the forefront of a lot of testing and learning. I know, like in our offices in Sydney, we're at a stage where there's no masks, we're doing small. So how do we learn from you? How do we get some of those best practices? Because I feel like there's so much that we could, and even in the technology side. So I'm just wondering, how do we learn from one another?
Well, reach out through the network that the EIC provides. That's very important. I think one of the biggest innovations that we did here in Marina Bay Sands was the hybrid broadcast studio that serves a platform for people to connect globally. And typically, when you develop something as revolutionary as that, because it has mixed reality, holographic presence all in one, you tend to keep it close to your chest. But what happened for this year was we actually came up with the technological framework plan, schematic of the hybrid broadcast studio, and we made it available for any city and any conference center who wanted, who wished to set up a studio of their choice. I think this is a time where the industry must work together to grow collectively. It's not about how Singapore recovers or what Singapore does, or what New York does, what Sydney does. It is what the world collectively does as a whole. And that's where, it's important, especially important now that we stay together as one and leverage the networks that we have. We have always been in a network close community, and I think more so now, it's all about collaborative partnership moving forward.
Amy, I feel like there's maybe an innovation exchange day or something that maybe we should, consider. There's some good, I think there's some really interesting stuff that I think we could all learn from.
Yeah, I think that was so important. I know David touched on it when we started to curate our task force to make sure that we had a real global body, because we knew that, that the pandemic itself, there would be, sort of an ebb and flow reality to the virus itself, and that due to that, we might all be dealing with slightly different realities and at a given moment, right? And we are learning and growing and sharing as we go. Will be far better off than if we had, operated in an isolated or perhaps in a way that, didn't sort of maximize those networks that have always been in place, right? We've done so much to grow as a global industry over the past, 15, 20 years. And it would have been a shame not to capitalize on that. But, I think people really did, as WeeMin is saying, they put aside a lot of their own, behaviors around perhaps, worrying more about competition and, exclusionary practices in favor of the common good, in favor of unifying. So,
and we saw this in the work that we did, where you had neck and neck competitors that traditionally would never share. And they just, I put it in the chat, the competitive mindset evaporated. And I mean, metaphorically, everything is open source.
I mean, and that was really important as well. And we as a group, we meet and we're constantly talking about how can we share out this information and make sure that it's reaching the broadest audience. And that means that EIC has to go beyond its traditional channels, not just utilizing our members, but our stakeholder partners, organizations that, we would clearly welcome into our membership to try to, make sure that, these professionals that might not be connected to a membership organization or a particular, a network that is in tune with all of these resources and where to go to broaden their horizons.
And I'll say one more thing and then I'll stop talking.
No, it's true.
Really, really smart DMOs are looking outside the traditional ecosystem of tourism and hospitality to look at business thought leaders that are doing really smart things that tourism organizations can learn from and adapt.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing that throughout the DMO world.
And I think,
David, to your point, one of the things that I've really, sorry, Amy, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Julie.
One of the things that I've really seen this year that has really encouraged me is how much cooperation and communication there has been between DMOs, facilities, contractors, and other suppliers, because the only way we can help our mutual clients be successful is to be on the same page and have the same information in this rapidly changing environment. So that's been really critical and a really positive thing that I hope is long-term. And Kristin, to your point, as far as sharing some of this information, one of the things that I think is great about all these guides is that many of them have really great global case studies to give you an opportunity to look at what is being done in around the world.
Yeah,
Very true.
Some of the countries
and building on to what David said, it's not just about looking at what our peers are doing or counterparts are doing. We need to look at parallel industries. When we went on what we term as our own reimagine journey here in Singapore, we looked at parallel industries. We looked at e-gaming, how they leverage technology to capture people's imagination. We looked at sports, and how sports is perhaps the best example of how you could bring a hybrid format to real life. And we also looked at news broadcasting, and how they could leverage the technology again, to bring something as mundane as weather reporting to absolutely new heights. So we learn from parallel industries, and I think increasingly our industry we need to stop to look internally inwards and to look outwards to see what new technology formats as well as ideas that we can bring into our own industry to leverage upon.
Yeah, it's great to see what's happening in terms of this collaboration from the DMOs to organizers and so forth. They say, going through an historical event is probably the hardest thing to do. But when we go look back at this moment, we're going to see so many great things that are coming out of this. And it's going to really change the industry. So it's really good. Again, I know it's hard right now. I mean, not everybody's at a great place because we're still going through this historical event. But when we come out of it, I think there's going to be some great stories.
And we will be stronger.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel like we're all storming. right now.
I mean, this is really our World War II moment. I mean, there's all these analogies. This is a historical moment in time, and we will hopefully be able to look back and say, we are better for it. We have learned.
Yeah, I think it was smart the way we set up the dual path too, right? So we know, again, we needed to deliver information now, but we wanted to focus our efforts on exactly what all of you are bringing forward, is this need for adaptation and innovation. And we will definitely be relying on one another, have to look outside of our industry, have to really talk to academic communities. You know, there's so much potential for us to really come out stronger if we do that.
So I want to keep us on track. And I also want to address, I changed locations, and you can hear noise because in our world, our office is in our homes. So I have contractors, I have dogs, and Johnnie, help me out, because a year ago, we all had to like go in our homes, and we had kids, you know, that we had to school. We had probably grandparents living with us, I mean, I just feel like everything is now, you know, we've had to live this way for a year, and our well-being is, you know, our roller coaster of emotions. We're trying to reskill. I mean, help us out here. What have we learned in a year, and what are we dealing with now as we have this excitement going forward?
Well, what we learned is have a lot of virtual happy hours, for one thing. That's probably the start.
Kristin, my bottle of wine is chilling in the fridge right now. Should I go get it?
Yeah. Who would have thought that we would be dancing in front of a camera having a drink? I mean, no one would have thought that would be the case. But we learn, we adapt, and that's kind of what I think we're all learning here, is how to adapt in this new. And I think someone said earlier, a new extraordinary time. Because it's different, but we have to keep in mind the wellness. You know, we have to ensure that we are keeping ourselves in a good atmosphere, a good feeling, because there's a lot of stresses that's going to be happening or still happening. You know, from us being pulled. We're dealing with our family, dealing with work, and you know, as Kristin said, just in the middle of all of this, what I say, a tornado. So taking time out for yourself, you know, separating the work from your life. Meaning, you know, for example, I had a staff member who works from home in an apartment, you know, not a very large apartment. So the living room couch was his office, where he had breakfast, where he had dinner, and so forth. He never separated the two. And so he was stressing out. So my counsel to him is, you know, still set a time, you know, just like you were working from your home, from your office, still set a time. You know, you work from 9 to 5, 9 to 6, whatever that is. And at 6 o'clock, shut it down. Move to another location, you know, go into the dining room or your bedroom. Don't stay right in that same place that you made as an office for the entire day, because you're not separating the two, and that's not creating that wellness. Continue to exercise, get out and walk. Right now, the weather is getting really, really great here on the East Coast. So get out and walk, get a bike. Everyone has a dog now. I mean, I think everyone has a dog now, which is great.
Do you want to meet mine? I'll go get my wine and the dogs if you'd like to meet them. I'll even get my contractor. I meet my contractor.
I think we should have a guest appearance from your contractor.
I know. I think all of us have dogs now, or new dogs. So, you know, get out with the dogs, get out with the family, and that's the thing. That's going to help in relieving a lot of this stress, this buildup that you're going to have of continuing to work, because we're doing more and more now. I mean, you know, we talked about, and I'm transitioning to the reskilling and upskilling, and that's now what we have to do. We are inundated with doing different things. You know, who would have thought virtual events would be the thing we're doing for 6 months? Well, that required a new skill. So we now have to learn new skills. We're going out and getting certification and so forth, which I totally believe in, and I think we should continue to go to the experts to get that information, so that it helps us better be prepared to develop these programs and be able to put them or have them at a high level. But now we're going into the hybrid events, and this is going to create more stress for you, because you have to use more resources. You know, you're going to have to juggle the in-person and juggle the remote audience. So again, now it's upskilling the skills that you had when you just learned about virtual. So again, going out and getting more education related to that, which again, I think that is the perfect way of helping with that stress too. leaning on the experts to help you learn how to do that, or leaning on colleagues that are already doing this now. Make sure you have a great network of individuals that you can call upon, because some of us have gone through this already, so you can learn from them. And then, and also I'm talking about, more of the organizers, but on the flip side, the sales staff, you are now selling to a new audience, a different audience. As you're coming out of furlough and back to your positions, the selling atmosphere or environment is a little bit different than it was before. So you have to adapt to that. So again, it's an opportunity to learn how to sell very differently than what you were doing before. And they're probably selling a product a little bit different too, because as we know, a number of the venues are now adding on the functions of hybrid and that sort of thing. So you need to learn how to understand all the tactics behind that to be able to sell that. And then also, I just saw a study not too long ago where we're going to see, unfortunately, the hourly employee, which in the hospitality industry, so working at hotels and so forth, frontline, they may not even come back until, and I'm just talking the US right now, may not even come back until September. And the reason why, that's when unemployment goes away. Because if you think about it, if I'm a person that's sitting at home and I'm getting an unemployment check, and it's more than what I was getting an hourly rate to be in the hotel, that means I'm going to probably stay at home and keep doing what I'm doing instead of coming to the office. So now you as the hotelier is dealing with resource shortage. So how do you deal with that? So you're going to have to start figuring out, how you can bring in different staff, train different individuals, getting people to work in different departments that they weren't working in before. So it's a lot that's going to be happening within, the 6 to 9 months as we start to get out of or get into more of this new extraordinary time, sorry.
And I think that's a good segment to bring Julie into this conversation, because as we talk about the, the future and the forecasting, and I think the variables that we didn't have 12, 18 months ago, and actually having to have those conversations of what wasn't in my budget 12 months ago? What were the resources I didn't have? And I think, Julie, I know I'm dealing with it, COVID protocols. I mean, that was a budget I didn't have to have, a line item, finding more contractors and resources. So Julie, I'd love to hear what, you're kind of thinking and what your customers are kind of communicating with you.
Right. Well, I think one of the biggest challenges right now is, the good news is we're getting closer to, more widespread in-person events. The challenge is that the guidelines are changing so rapidly. You are planning today for an event and an environment that might be radically different in 6 months. So you have to make a certain amount of assumptions. You have to decide how much risk you're willing to take, and then you have to plan accordingly. So we're all working on a much shorter planning cycle. I don't want to compete with the DMOs and David, but contractors and suppliers obviously have had huge cutbacks in their staffing. And we're trying to do our best right now to take care of all of our clients with less staff. The work is ramping up, but the revenue isn't there until we actually produce the events. So at what point do you start bringing staff back? And how do you fund that? And how are you sure that there will be work for them, because the environment can change? And so, there are a lot of different solutions we're looking at right now. I think that in the short term, there's going to be a lot of project work, a lot of, gig work per se. Certainly our company's, launched a flex program to see how we can bring people in on projects until we can bring them back full time. But, the concern for all of us, similar to what Johnnie mentioned, is that there is some real talent that may be lost, and some of it potentially permanently. Because, for instance, even if you look in our labor workforce, some of the real pros that might have worked a couple more years might have opted to retire at this point in time, because they weren't going to sit at home and wait for work for a year and a half. Some of the up and coming supervisors and people at that level had to find jobs to support their families, and they may like 9 to 5. They're now experiencing something different, and some of them may like it. So part of what we have done, we'd like to use that analogy of when the bus is roaring down the freeway, you don't change the tires. Well, we've had the chance to change the tires, look under the hood, rotate the tires, look at everything. And so we've looked at, can we do our processes more efficiently? Are there things that we could be doing differently and better? And so certainly when staff comes back, there will be a retraining process, but hopefully it will be for the better.
I have a question for you in regards to third parties. I feel like this is one area that, everybody is clamoring to get back. And, we're a company that we're trying to figure this out because we don't manage this event. We're relying on somebody else and their protocols and their safety. And I'm just curious because, I'm hearing Mobile World Congress is thinking big numbers. I'm hearing, Vegas, a lot of people are starting to look at, going into Vegas or Orlando. But if we're going to go to that event, we're going and following what that organizer. So I'm just curious what you are hearing and what kind of protocols or concerns as we start looking at third parties.
Yeah, so obviously the protocols are set by whether it's the jurisdiction, the state, the local governing body, whatever. The facility then interprets them. It's, exactly how to do those rules work within the facility. And then it's up to all of the third parties to enforce them. Now, from our standpoint, we have our own protocols, but if our client comes in and says, okay, everybody for this event needs to be tested, then we're all going to be tested. If, for instance, I'm in California, you probably all heard the rules that came out in California, which is, there's going to be an expectation for if you go over a certain size that there needs to be proof of vaccination. We're going to be juggling a lot of different rules that could be changing, and ultimately the show organizer is going to be responsible for ensuring that all of the parties that are working with them and for them are enforcing, the rules that the jurisdiction requires. And it's going to be complex. I mean, I spoke to the head of our convention planning or drafting department recently, and in a normal year, we do about 17,000 versions of floor plans. And we're working with 300 to 400 jurisdictions just domestically. So you can imagine keeping on top of all the changing rules that every, health inspector, fire marshal, facility, et cetera, is requiring. So having that dialogue, we talked about the DMOs and the facilities, and just keeping that constant is going to be absolutely critical through this period.
And I actually feel like that is actually one of the new roles that have come out of COVID, because I know we have somebody, on our team that's focused just on the COVID protocols, the changing, state and local governments. We have to, it is moving all the time. I think the other thing is the forecasting. It's like this moving dart, because you're like, and we both are in California. So we're like, okay, how many people can I have live right now in California? And I know you sit on that coalition, but I think that's the other thing when we're trying to make some money, or we're trying to put a registration dollar around it. Like, that's the other really hard challenge, because it's just a moving needle.
It is, and it's a whole different conversation right now, because as you know, all suppliers have had to have different types of conversations with their clients in the last year, because first it started out with, if your event doesn't happen, we're going to have to charge you for some things that normally you don't pay for. And now it is, okay, if the scope of your show is different, then, the interpretation of your contract is changing. And if you can't really tell me what the scope is going to be now for your event in 6 months, then we need to be really careful about what work we're doing when, so that we're good stewards of your budget, and at the same time that we can get the work done on time. So it's a real interesting time, and it takes a level of cooperation, collaboration, and trust, and transparency that
and partnership. I think the partnership is number one. And this is where I want to open it up to the panel, because we just have a few remaining minutes on kind of, what are some of the key takeaways that you feel that our viewers should look at into some of these guides? And I'm going to start with David, because, you and I started this, this conversation of a task force. So what do you think are just a couple really key takeaways that people can leave today?
So I'll talk about the one that I wrote, the destinations website, destinations workbook. Go into it and look at the links for the destinations that you want to go to, whether it's a national, state, provincial, city site. There's an abundance of information that is destination geographically specific, and just launch into that and you will find information.
Great. WeeMin, what do you think? As we start to, these big conventions, I know they all want to come back. What do you think that we should be thinking about in the exhibition space?
I think we need to probably learn from each other's best practices. I think that's best captured in today's discussion. I learned so much from fellow panelists here. And also to probably refer to guidebooks, because the series of guidebooks seriously guided us in our own reimagining journey. So the key takeaway for me is there's a set of resources that we can leverage on as an industry, and I think we should do that. And I'm going to leave with a statement that someone told me. It's not about what you did in the past 20 years of your experience in the industry. It's what we as an industry are going to do in the next 6 months that's going to define us forever. So yeah, we live in truly interesting times.
I think that is a great statement that we should all follow. I love that. Johnnie, Allison, Julie, any other, kind of parting words before we turn it back over to Amy to...
I think I'll just reiterate what I said earlier, which is as the planners, we've become the pivotal piece of communication between so many different people, and what we learn and how fast we learn it and how we communicate it with our stakeholders is going to define the success of our events, especially in the near future.
And I would say there's no better time to take a risk and reinvent and reimagine and try all the things that you didn't try before because things were going along fine. Take a risk.
And then I'll end with is that you're not in this alone. I mean, that's the one great thing about this industry. We operate as a community. We operate as a tribe, and remember, there's other individuals in this tribe that can help you throughout this process. So again, remember that you're not in this alone.
I love that we are a tribe, and the head of our tribe, Amy Calvert, take us home.
Great job, Kristin, Johnnie, Allison, WeeMin, Julie, David. You guys are fantastic. So, I want to just sort of echo what we started talking about at the very beginning of this conversation, is that we knew from the very beginning that this would be a journey in rebuilding trust and confidence, right? And it's an opportunity for all of us to really, really embrace this notion of advocacy, and that we all have an opportunity to tell our best story every day, not necessarily the direct economic impact, but the why, the reason that what we do, why business events matter, and how we help build and shape communities. And I think really capturing the hearts and minds of policymakers, is something we all have to be thinking about when we go out in the world and we're talking to people, not necessarily in our industry, but outside of our industry, about who we are and what we do. I think having an anchor, these guiding principles, this notion of our indirect and our catalytic impact is going to be so important. And I really, really hope that we continue this unity, right, going forward, that we don't lose sight of how much we've learned from one another and how important our peer groups are and our communities. And we inspire new people who are coming into our industry to invest in developing those for themselves, right? And I'm really, really super, super grateful to this task force. You folks have done just such a tremendous job and really have given so much. And I will always be personally so grateful to all of you for your great work and your commitment and just showing up in such a generous fashion. And with that, I will wish everyone a good evening, a good day, a great Global Meetings Industry Day celebration. Thank you for being with us, to all of our participants, and stay in touch and be on the lookout for Apex COVID Task Force Recovery Work 2.0, new business models, research, And
Thanks, Amy.
Docs. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.